say, "Oh yeah, it's reactable," and then no, it wasn't. So that's great. So because of this, because the feedback was great, and because it really helps Nusha, we've decided to push these live right now. Right, so that's great.
Awesome.
So
Right
just to
now?
go through the changes themselves. So heavy attacks on cancel the glass waltz at 500 ms up from 4. From zone attack, it goes to Jade Ballet at 700 instead of 6. And glass waltz and Jade Ballet are now 300, down from 4. So what this means overall is that it's gonna land at the same time, right? So when you used to play with Nusha, you can do like a heavy soft feint to glass waltz, for example, and it would land the exact same time as the hit would have landed, right? So you need to block it at the right time, parry at the right time, do all that sort of stuff. This does not change. However, what does change is okay. This is weird. Okay, so what does change? Sorry, tech issue. It always happens with live stuff, right?
A little bit.
Yeah. So what does change, however, is the fact that the soft feint, basically like the cancels to glass waltz and J ballet come out a little bit later, and the trap itself is a bit faster. So because of this, it's like a little bit later than normal feint timing. So it's even harder to tell if somebody fainted or is going to use it. And on top of that, it's so much faster. Like that 100 ms pushes it toward being fully unreactable, which means that it's going to be like it's a lot easier to land and it's a lot harder to react, right? You really have to make a read whenever she throws a heavy. So that's great. It works really well. It's an interesting tool because it works way better at high level where people don't like miss time parries or whatever.
Right,
It's great. And so it's a super interesting tool. We love to be able to keep the uniqueness on Nusha. And we're really happy that we found a solution that worked for this.
Oh, I'm super happy too because Nusha's like just hands down my favorite Wulin, my favorite of the assassins. Just because
I
she looks
do.
so darn cool.
Yeah,
Visual
she
play
does
as
it
her.
really
She's a
well.
lot of
Like,
fun.
Everything's so unique about this
Yeah,
character.
it's so
that,
unique.
we really wanted to. And I'm super happy that we're actually able to keep it
Me too.
and
Me
to
too.
have that function in there, right? Because otherwise, the other solutions were not as fun as this.
I know. I wasn't.
Our
I was
solutions
really
would
hoping
be
for this.
remove
Yeah.
the
Glad
trash,
I'm
make
glad
them
it worked.
unblockable.
Super hyped about
That's
this.
what I would.
All right, okay. So next up, Warden. So Warden's
Uh-oh.
been underperforming for a little while, unless you
Yeah,
count the
I was
duel
gonna say, I'm like,
tournament,
did you watch the duel tournament?
where
'Cause-
you're like, well, you got Blitz and you got Ranquist that are like, Warden specialists, but they're so high level that at some point we can't expect everybody to play at
This
their
is
level.
big.
So we're doing some changes to Warden to make the hero a little bit more competitive, a little bit better in group fights. That's one of the aspects where Warden has a bit of a harder time. So we're doing like 2 major changes. So first of all, we're changing his side heavy finishers.
Yeah.
They're 100 ms faster, right? So they're 800 instead of 9. That should really help getting them out, right? Because at 900, it's a bit slow.
It's almost a
It's
full
a little
second.
bit easier for people around you to react to. You have to time them a little bit more differently. So at 8, it's a more standard speed, but it really helps. We've seen in the past that when we've sped up Orochi's side heavy finishers, for example, they tend to be much better. They hit a lot more, so that's great. And on top of this, we've also improved their trajectory. So for this, it's a little bit different. Normally, when Warden swings, like you're gonna swing your big sword. The thing is that the way the weapon swings is really diagonal.
Yeah.
So we normally like the way it worked is the trajectory that we had really matched the weapon super well. But because of this, it was super hard to hit people externally around you, right? And even sometimes it looked like the weapon was going to hit them and it didn't. So what we did is we took that trajectory and we flattened it quite a bit. So it doesn't 100% match the weapon, but we can cheat that a little bit so that it hits people around you a way better.
Right.
So we've done that for his side heavy finisher. So this way, Warden can actually defend himself around with people around him and really hit them on the side. So that works quite well.
It should feel a lot better.
That's
to play
awesome.
like
That
in
is
that
amazing.
situation.
I
And then
cannot
on
wait.
top of this, a feature that I've seen requested by players quite a bit, and we've done some testing, it seemed to feel really good, was that shoulder bash. Normally, when you want to do it off a front dodge, right? You could only do it from 3 to 500 ms. So you can delay it a little bit, not too much, but because it's a charging bash. Takes a while to get into. Takes like a little bit too long to get into the actual bash portion, even if you don't charge it. We're super comfortable making it start at 100 ms in your front dodge. So that accomplishes a couple things. It's going to come out 200 ms faster if you just buffer everything, right? Which makes a big difference. It's a bit harder to react to, and you can also delay it even more, right? So if you think somebody's going to like try to dodge super early or dodge later, do whatever you want to do, like it gives you a lot more versatility with Warden. It should make it a lot easier to open up people with. And so shoulder bash is a really great tool for Warden, right? Like it lets you really initiate from further out. It lets you do like a lot of weird things that not a lot of heroes are able to do. So it's great. And even though Warden is a little bit simpler in terms of kit and what the character kind of does, at the end of the day, these small changes should really, really help the viability in Dominion at least. Also in duels a little bit with the opening with shoulder bash. So we're confident that it's going to keep going forward. And we're still keeping an eye on Warden, right? Because even with this, might not get to, S tier or something, which is okay. But if the hero is still really underperforming, we can still keep it going and do more changes as we've been doing for quite a bit now. So
we do now, yeah.
it works pretty well, right?
We got a good cadence going.
All right. So next up in our list of underperforming heroes is Hitokiri.
Underperforming.
What? Yeah, it's a lot of text, right? We're gonna have to look at this. I'll explain it.
Okay, please help me.
Yeah, right. But
low loss.
The idea is that Hitokiri has also been kind of underperforming. Sometimes it's a bit of a noob stomper. Like it's very effective at lower levels.
I didn't want to say anything because when you said that, I'm like, what do you mean underperforming? Oh no,
right?
Am I the noob being stomped?
That's the thing.
Oh,
Right?
no.
So we've tried to focus some changes to Hito that are shouldn't really affect much lower level, but should have higher impacts, like a lot more impact at higher level, so that the hero's more playable. She's gonna be a little bit more accessible, but have a bit more power there. So what we've been doing is first of all her heavy openers, right? So before if you remember, launch Hitokiri, right?
I do remember launch.
Launch Hito was like very strong because Launch Hito had uninterruptible stance on those opener heavies, but very, very, very early,
right?
Which led to the much loved heavy on red meme. Heavy on red actually. So we ended up removing the armor there, like the armor there. We decided to remove it from there because it was like a little bit too strong, and we wanted to like really like bring the power level down for the hero. However, as we've been going on and advancing with the hero and like doing a lot more heroes, a lot more reworks, a lot more that sort of stuff, Hito kind of fell down in the rankings and like not as playable as it used to be. So we're adding back armor there, but we're adding it back at 500 MS at the earliest.
Okay.
So basically, it's like if you tap heavy, then 500 MS into that, you're gonna get armor.
It was just
right?
a variable time heavies for me.
It comes in a little bit later.
But
so
we're getting better at this.
Things that it's different, but the idea here is that one of the big counters to Hito was just like lighting. Whenever you saw Hito like throwing a heavy, often enough, if you're like, oh yeah, they're gonna charge a little bit or whatever, you could like really hit them out with a light. It was super hard. Made the hero like hard to really open up and initiate with.
That's what I was supposed to do this whole time.
Yeah, that's what you're supposed to do this whole time.
I know.
Mash light is gonna work. So yeah, but so here's the thing, right? So by doing this, by making this small change, it really lets her like be able to open up in a bit more like open and free manner, right? That really helps. And on top of this, we've also reduced the minimum charge time for the uncharged version, right? The version when you tap. So it used to be that you would charge for 400 milliseconds. And then the strike itself, so when it actually started to swing, was 400. So we've reduced the charge portion by 100 ms. So the total attack time when you just tap heavy is 700 instead of 8. We've also reduced the damage a little bit to compensate for this. But it also helps with the armor coming in, with the slightly faster opener speed. Should really help Hitokiri like really get there. It has a couple of like really good points, right? It adds 100 ms more delayability, so you can be less predictable with it. And it also has a pretty nice impact on frame advantage. So when you do end up landing your big heavy finishers, like those big, like I forget the name because I'm kind of bad.
I think it's big heavy finisher.
Big heavy finisher, right?
That's the
fully charged
term.
ones
that
are unblockable and armored. So when you do land them, you put your opponent in heavy hit reaction, and then you get a lot of frame advantage.
Right.
And so because of this, with the heavies being at 700, it gives you a bit of an edge that you didn't really have before, on top of the armor, on top of all of those good things. So we're really hoping that it'll open up Hitokiri's game plan a little bit more here and let her be able to get in a little bit more, get a bit more pressure going, use all of her kit and get into it and, just perform better.
Bingo.
So that's good. And then we've also adjusted the chain timings from her opener heavies to the chain heavy attacks. Well, the opener heavies and chain heavies to chain heavies, chain lights, light finishers, kicks, and whatever. So it used to be from 366 to 400 ms. So whenever you would like hit your heavy, it would block, it would hit, or whatever.
Yeah.
The time it would take for the next attack to even start would be at 366. Yeah. The reason why we did this is to make sure that if you threw a heavy and it landed or was blocked or whatever, everybody could always dodge the following light. Because we felt, oh yeah, it's a bit too, like, it's a bit oppressive. It's kind of hard to deal with. So we decided to revert this and to go back to 200 to 400. So it gives you, again, a bit bigger delayability window, makes you a little bit less predictable, also makes that light tougher to deal with, right? Because if you're trying to pre-dodge whatever is going to be happening, that light is going to hit you. With the dot changes, it also helps a little bit there. So that's great.
Yeah.
But it's like, it's all that stuff, and it also makes the hero better just because the chain heavies that have armor, the armor kicks in late. So because it kicks in late, now it's going to kick in a little bit earlier, like 166 MS earlier, which makes a bit of a difference there. So it's all those like little changes here that we can do that really help the flow of the hero and get into a position where, well, actually, I feel better playing her. I get a bit more options. I can actually use everything in my kit to be able to get somewhere, right? Her kit is kind of, it's not that it's limited. There's not a lot of stuff, but it's designed to be around kind of being kind of like a blender where you're going in and whenever she does a correct read, whenever something right happens, she gets to go again and again and again and again. And that's the idea. But with those timings, that was a little bit too challenging to get to. So we kind of messed around with that a little bit to make it a bit more accessible. Now, last but not least, even though it's on the last item on the list, we adjusted our zone attack trajectory to better match weapon visuals.
I didn't think it was that bad, but we'll see.
But essentially, her zone attack was a bit underwhelming. Couldn't really hit a lot of people around.
Not too
so
much.
We really adjusted it so like it hits a bit further, hits more around her, and should be a better tool to use when there's multiple people around you. Try to hit them all in the meeting lane as well is pretty good.
Oh, okay.
One of the
that heavy openers,
run Nuke Kubi.
I don't know. I don't think that's the charged heavy. Just probably just a regular heavy. Now there's 22 from 24.
It doesn't matter. You go. You just
one of the feet.
Yeah, one of the feet.
I
to go
not
max
think she would
heavy,
get
kill a
changed.
bunch
I
of
hope
minions,
Medjay get some love. Come
that
on.
works well. So yeah, so that's it for Hitokiri there.
Wow.
So a lot of changes here. We hope everybody likes them. We're keeping an eye on the hero again. Keep going and see where we go.
Yeah, we keep an eye on all the heroes. By the way, just so you know that, like, we don't just ignore
laser focus on everybody
for sure.
Okay.
So next up,
not expect
so
this.
This is a kind of a different change, right? So it's a buff and a nerf at the same time, which might sound a little bit weird, but I'll explain the logic behind it.
Blew my mind there. How does this work?
Aramusha has blade blockade, right? So blade blockade is when you tap down on the right stick. Goes into this kind of motion, can block a bunch of attacks, gets a bunch of different follow-ups. The thing is, you can go into blade blockade during the recovery of all of your attacks for like pretty much the entire time of the recovery. So you can cancel into it really well. We did this to make sure that you're able to time properly all these things. Right? So that works well. However, you had such a large penalty on stamina when you whiffed it because it used to cost 5 stamina just to perform the move. And if you didn't block anything, you would pay an extra 10. So it would go up to 15. It didn't really incentivize you to kind of use it. You were getting double penalized because most of the time when you miss it, you get guard broken. Something else happens. So you get kind of like double penalized here. So what we decided to do instead is put all the stamina cost for this up front. So it's on the activation itself. It now costs 10. So when you do manage to land it, it's still going to cost you 10, but it's always going to cost you 10, whether you block somebody with it or not. And so it should help also not really overuse it, right? It might just look like, oh yeah, just 5 extra stamina, but in the long term, it kind of makes a difference.
It adds up,
especially with Aramusha that has like a lot of like really fast attacks. You're blowing through stamina like crazy.
Right.
So with this, you want to use it a little bit more sparingly, but you're not as penalized when you mistime it. So that's kind of like the idea here. It's a small change, but it has a good effect on Aramusha where you end up, okay, well, you got to think a little bit more when you want to do it, right? So we like to promote that type of gameplay, so that kind of works there.
I like it, very cool.
Was not expecting that.
Finally, Jorm, this might seem like more of a bug fix, but it's a big thing there. You can now perform Jormungandr